Look up the word crazy in the dictionary and you might just find an asterisk beside the definition that says, listen to the Subiquitous podcast featuring Sue Duffield and you'll find out what crazy means. Sue's travelogue journey of unfiltered stories, impossible miracles, and faith-filled fun will be revisited right here. So buckle up and let's get going with this humorous travelogue of an unfiltered saint, Subiquitous.
This is episode number 104. Exactly 2 years the Subiquitous podcast has been broadcasting. And I'll tell you, somebody told me that the average podcast lasts only 7 weeks. Well, by far, I've surpassed that with 104 weeks. And I can't think of a better guest to have celebrating 2 years than my good old friend. And we say old with italics. Mr. Steven Speer. Steve, it's great to have you with me today.
Thank you.
So, you know what? We go back a long time. I remember the very first time I met you, actually in person, was 1973. I was traveling with the Sammy Hall Singers and the Spears. We're playing, I think it was in Fayetteville Auditorium in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And we had a lot in common from the beginning, and I'll tell you why. You and I both liked Bette Midler.
I love Bette Midler.
And she was just an iconic, crazy person. And I thought anybody in gospel music who loves Bette Midler has to be a pretty cool guy.
I'll tell you, I saw Bette Midler at, I believe it was called the Palace in New York City. We paid, and this was back in the days when tickets to concerts were $7, $8, something like that. And we paid $10 to stand in the back and watch from behind the seat, behind the railing that's behind the seats in the theater. We stood back there and watched an incredible show. Barry Manilow was playing piano that night.
Wow. That's the soundtrack of our life besides Southern gospel music. I mean, it really is. And when we go back and review some of the influences that we had, let's just start right from the top, Steve. You were pretty out there with your legacy of a family of gospel music singers. I mean, you were pretty hip back then, playing bass with that long hair.
And standing on piano benches. And, my dad never was restrictive on the type of music that we listened to. And he had a really surprisingly broad range of musical taste himself. Had a big album collection that I'd listen to every now and then. People like Louis Prima.
Mm-hmm.
And who's the guy that did Ella Fitzgerald?
Mm-hmm.
Brooke Benton was who I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of people that were not gospel artists, but the music itself, had value, and he recognized that. And so I grew up. I remember the very day that Led Zeppelin 3 came out.
Oh, my.
And I drove to the shop the first day it was released.
Wow.
And they had these racks behind the counter that they had all these different albums on display, the new releases. Every single slot was full of the Led Zeppelin 3 album. And I bought that, went home and, was already a Led Zeppelin fan. So, I grew up listening to that stuff as well as going to concerts and listening to the Statesmen, Blackwoods, and Oak Ridge Boys.
Right.
Dad's best friend was Willie Wynn, who sang tenor for the Oak Ridge Boys for years and years. So we had a broad musical education, musical heritage.
Right. What was it like as a kid? Now, I know later on as a teenager when we got to know you a little bit better, but what was it like as a kid to know that your grandparents and your parents were so instrumental? I mean, they're the pioneers. Let's face it. They were the pioneers of what we know today as Southern gospel music. What was it like? Were you aware of that as a child?
I was. I've often said some of my first memories were sleeping in the overhead compartment on a Silverside bus when when we'd have school vacations and things, and a lot of my brother and sister and my cousins were on the bus, and would run out of beds, so they would clear off a space in the overhead luggage racks, make a little pallet up there, blankets, and we'd sleep up there. And just growing up, hearing that music, going to those concerts, and realizing the place that my family had in the history of gospel music, it was, that question, what was it like, is a hard one for anybody to answer because they don't know what it's like for anybody else.
No, that's true. That was your normal, right? That was your normal.
Yeah, that was the norm.
And the thing that I loved most of all, of course, about your dad and, of course, your uncle as well, is with their dedication for excellence. And we had Dave Clark on an episode several months ago. And
I'm sorry.
I know I'm going to have to tag him on this. Dave Clark, I mean, seriously, he told us some great stories about your dad and great stories about Brock and just the whole, the atmosphere of appreciation that Dave Clark had for you as well as a group. And basically, not only were you affected as their kids, but everybody that was in that group. I mean, to this day, I think of Jeannie Johnson and Sue Dodge and the people that came out of that whole realm that just changed their lives and changed the course of their life. And I think what I want to say, too, right now is I'm just proud of you that you want to continue the legacy of your dad. And I'm just so grateful that you're continuing to do that. And we're going to talk about the Stamps-Baxter School in a few minutes. But it's just great that you're just continuing that legacy. But it's got to be tough, too, at the same time to fulfill his shoes as well.
Well, and there's no fulfilling his shoes, and I would drive myself crazy trying to do that. But I do know that he cared deeply about the full name is Ben Speer Stamps-Baxter School of Music.
Right.
And he started it in 1986, and he cared deeply about that and imparting the knowledge to the younger generation of people coming up in the business. And so many of them go back to their home churches and are able, with this knowledge that they receive at the school, to do a better job and even pass along that knowledge to people in their small groups in church, or as a leading member of the choir or choir director. And those kind of things tend to spread out like a pebble thrown in a lake. Mm-hmm. The ripples.
That's right.
You don't know how far they go and how many people are touched. And hopefully, as was his hope, how much professionalism, how much quality has increased by the training that they get at the school. So he cared very deeply about that, and I feel like I want to carry that on and continue to make an impact with newer generations. And we have a lot of retired people who come as well, because now they've got the time to do something that they've always wanted to do. And we have one guy who's been coming for 20 years, probably, maybe more. He is in his 80s, I believe, and he has a group he calls the Social Security Quartet. And it's a bunch
Oh
of
my goodness,
guys
that's awesome.
that are his age,
Yeah.
and they love singing, and they'll sing at churches around and sing at retirement homes and places like that. There are people who just love what they're doing, and hopefully we can help them to do it better.
Well, my take, and I thank you for inviting Jeff and I several years ago, well, a couple of years ago, we had heard about it. And here's where we kick ourselves. Okay. Two things we kick ourselves about is that as kids, Jeff should have gone to the Stamps-Baxter School of Music. I mean, as a kid, he should have. There's no doubt about it. We've talked about that before. And then number two, I'm probably the only singer in the history of Ben Speer's life that ever turned him down 3 times. First strike, second strike, and third strike. And I got to a point the last time I saw him at the quartet convention, he looked at me and then looked away and he said, "I don't even want to talk to you." And I really, if there was ever a regret, I guess I don't have many, but there is one regret, that when Sue left and your uncle and Ben came up to New Jersey and we were just living, we just bought a house and we had come back after being with Sammy Hall and something crazy, just, wanting to be near our kids and near, not our kids, but our family. And so they offered us again. This was the second time. And then I just, for whatever reason, we didn't do it. And I don't know why, but God orders our starts and stops. But here's the cool thing is that we've been able to give back to your students at the Ben Speer's Stamps-Baxter School of Music by giving what our gifts are. And we saw it firsthand. I love the Social Security Quartet. And you're right, there's such a vast amount of ages. I mean, you'll have 70-year-olds and you'll have a 7 or a 10-year-old coming, and they're benefiting just the community. The community itself is worth the tuition to come for that week in July, just to watch what happens when people come for a common cause. And you're right. There's no age discrimination. I love that.
Right. And there are people that have made friendships that have lasted for years and years and years.
I had one experience with a young man who we posted today. He put together a minute video for us, who is a former student alumni, and he is his name is Braden Samoski. I'm telling you, he reminds me of young Sheldon. He's young Sheldon of the Southern gospel realm, Steve, and I know you know him well. He is just extremely brilliant, extremely talented, and loves Southern gospel music as a 16-year-old. And it's just wonderful to pass along that legacy. And everything he said on that video was absolutely true, except for one thing. He said he wished that you would start a workshop on your sick jokes. Oh, we laughed. I laughed about that. I said, yeah, Steve Speer's got the worst jokes ever.
It's good to run into somebody who has a real appreciation for good humor like him.
That's right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the details. What they need to do is to look at their calendar right now from July the 16th through the 23rd this year, 2022. Mark your calendars and get online at stampsbaxterschool.com and register for Ben Speer's Stamps-Baxter School of Music. And what a summer, fast, and fun week it is at Middle Tennessee State University. So what are the things, if they're thinking about this, how would you encourage someone who says, oh, I've always wanted to sing and I've always wanted to do that, but there's like, oh, is it really for me? What would you say to somebody like that?
I think it is for anybody who has even a modicum of talent, because that talent can be developed. The talent can be refined. There are people who teach at our school who have years and years of study under their belts, who know how to make a person who has some natural ability develop that ability. We give an award each year that's named after my uncle, Brock Speer, and the caption on that award is the verse, "Study to show thyself approved." And he was a big believer in continual study. When he was in his 60s, I believe it was, he would come in off the road. He would drive to Canton, Georgia, which was probably 5.5 hours, something like that. He'd stay a night in a motel. The next day, he would take voice lessons from Leroy Abernathy.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And
right.
if any people are listening to this whose history and Southern gospel music goes back that far, that was a pretty famous name in those days.
Right.
A real excellent voice teacher, renowned voice teacher. And he would take lessons and record those lessons. And then he'd listen to it as he drove back. And then the next week, when he drove down there again, or 2 weeks later, whatever it was, he would play that tape of the previous lesson again. So he would, even at his age and at his spot in the history of gospel music, he was still studying and still trying to improve and learn new things and better himself. So there's always room. There are always some tricks that somebody else knows, some tips, ways to do it better, ways to sing so that you don't end up hoarse at the end of the night or damage your voice, ways to last longer. Those are the kinds of things that we teach to people who have been singing a long time. And the people who are new at this, of course, if they start out the right way, then they're much further ahead.
And you have an arsenal of teachers and facilitators that not only are they gifted, but many of them are household names. And that's what's so amazing to me, because they're willing to give a week of their life, not only just to have a great time, but really to influence the young and the old. Like Joyce Martin Sanders, for one, just comes to mind, how the impact of her expertise and her way of delivering and helping the students with their performance. It's just so amazing to watch how influential. It's like a memory that they'll never, ever, ever forget.
That's right. We have 5 different levels of theory is what we had the last several times. When the Speer family was still on the road and we were having classes at Trevecca, and this would be probably, I think we went there in the year 2000. We switched from Belmont University to Trevecca University. We had enough students that we had as many as 9 different levels of theory class. So we have, if you know absolutely nothing about music, you don't know a quarter note from a half note, then we've got a theory class that starts right at the beginning. And we also have classes that people are writing their own songs during the class and arranging them, writing the parts for the songs. So whatever level a person is at, excuse me for ending that with a preposition, but whatever
It's all right.
level
It's
you
not
are,
thankfully, it's not grammar school. We're
right. We can help you take the next step or two down the road to more knowledge and becoming a better. In fact, as our advertising says, you'll sing better, you'll play better, we promise. And if at the end of the school you don't feel like you've made progress, we will refund your tuition.
You can't beat that. And people come from all over, everywhere. Everywhere. You would think because here in Nashville, Murfreesboro, it would be just this region. But I mean, there were students that came from, I think there was one student from Texas, several. The last time I was there, a few from way up in Pennsylvania. It's really cool how many people come from all over the
I
country.
believe the year you were there, which was 2018, we had people from about 26 states, I believe. We've had several people from Canada. At the end of school, we give recognition of people who have really worked the hardest and made the most progress and applied themselves. And that one of them is the Speer Award.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is the Anthony Berger Award, which is for the pianist who has done that. And a young lady from Romania won in the year that she came.
Wow.
So we've had people, just a few years ago, we had a young kid from Scotland who came to the school. So we've had people from all over the place. One of the things that really gave us a boost was the exposure we got from the Gaither video. And so people, of course, watched that the world over.
Sure. And it still happens, by the way.
Right.
I was just going through YouTube just because I can. And just watching so many artists that were students themselves at the school. I mean, countless amount of successful that go into a more, performance in Southern gospel. But then, like you say, the school isn't just for that. It's a great enhancement to encourage when they go back to their own churches as good worship leaders, as good choir members, as good musicians. And that's what I feel sets you apart a little bit as a school. Because it's not just for those of us to just want to be the next great Southern gospel group. It's beyond that. It's really reaching deep into the hearts and deep into the mind and the soul of those who want to continue this great music and never, ever let it go. And that's the legacy that your dad left, for sure.
People who have no desire or calling to be in a professional group on stage across the country, they're just concerned with singing in their own sphere of influence, so to speak. You enjoy it more if you do it better.
There's no doubt.
So we can help those people do it well, then their enjoyment and their impact on the people that they're singing to is going to improve.
There's nothing, as far as I'm concerned, Steve, nothing better than that. Nothing better than that, than encouraging someone that has a real heart for it. You know what I like too? I watched the professional side of many of your students that are, let's say, my age or a little younger, a little older, that came, that they have successful businesses, or they work for a company, or they're a teacher themselves in some other educational format, but they're just basically coming because they love to sing and they want to learn. And that's the difference between Ben Speer's Stamps-Baxter School of Music. It's a more of an encompassing attitude, I think. And when I experienced it myself, I saw it full force. I got it. I finally got it. I couldn't figure out why were 75-year-old people coming, and why was a 7-year-old, and why was a 23-year-old with trying to pursue a master's degree in something else. It's because their love of music and their love of the genre of convention singing or Southern gospel music or country gospel or whatever it might be. It's just amazing to me how that's the difference between you and a lot of other schools.
A lot of it goes back to the mission statement that Dad wrote. Let me read this to you here.
I'd love that.
This school is dedicated to the furtherance of Southern gospel music and to raising the standard of musical excellence in our art form.
Mm-hmm.
We believe the way to do this is to offer a well-rounded course of study. We want our students to be able to read it, write it, sing it, and perform it. With a comprehensive understanding of music theory, both live and recorded performances will improve.
What else is there? I mean, seriously, what else is there? I'm just honored that you would even acquiesce to lower your standards to be on this podcast, Stephen of Speer.
Well, I appreciate your honor there, and you've got 2 more minutes of my time. So,
Okay. Well, let's just take the last couple of minutes here, and I want to give them information.
no, you've got as much of my time as you want.
I do want to end on something fun, though. I want you to think in your sphere of influence, what is the funniest on-the-road story that you can tell our audience? Or if you have a funny story even about the school, or what comes to mind or what stands out in your mind, think about that for a minute while I tell them that they can get on Stamps-Baxter to register this year for the Ben Speer Stamps-Baxter School of Music summer session. It starts July the 16th through the 23rd, right here in the beautiful state of Tennessee. Oh my goodness, the amenities are incredible. Middle Tennessee State University is absolutely gorgeous. The food is fabulous, by the way. I have to tell you that. We didn't even talk about that. But the food is so great. As a form of the tuition, you can decide if you want to eat or whatever. You can do whatever. But get on the website and make your registration if you know of anybody. And we talked about also on another example, on another format I talked about, how about gifting someone with a week at the school? And I thought, what a great idea. So get on stampsbaxterschool.com and register today. So that gave you enough time to think about a funny story, and we'll close with that.
There was an artist, a group, who went to a certain church to sing, and they were to receive a love offering. The pastor got up and took the love offering. They passed the plates, and the plates were just full of money. You could see that there was a real good love offering.
Mm-hmm.
The gentleman took the plates. They went back in the room, counted the money. And then when the group left, the pastor handed them a check. And it was for something like $187 or something like that.
Uh-oh.
Well, that didn't compute.
Mm-mm.
So the next time they were at that church, same thing happened. Pastor took the offering. They passed the plates. Lots of money in those plates. The ushers headed to the back of the church, and the leader of the group said, Now, you just hold on right there. You guys just wait. I know what you're going to do. You're going to go in that back room. You're going to count that money.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's not enough there, you're going to put some of the church's funds with it. Now, I don't want you to do that. Just set the plates on the table back there, and we'll take it, change and all.
Smart man.
What else could they do?
What else could they do? Well, thank you, Stephen. Give your wife, Prilla, a big hug for me. You know, you married way up. You know that, right?
That's the truth.
I know. She's a gem of
By the way,
gems.
she just received this year her doctorate. She has 2 master's degrees already, and she received a doctorate this year. Boy, I married way over my head.
And here we are ending sentences with prepositions.
Right.
We should have Prilla on.
Right.
Well, Steve, I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. And I'll tell you, in the meantime, thank you again for being a part of the Subiquitous podcast. You can get on again. Let me give you that wonderful. You need to get on the website, if nothing more, just for the knowledge piece of what Stamps-Baxter School does. It is just amazing. The summer session starts July the 16th through the 23rd. Get on stampsbaxterschool.com to register. And in the meantime, Steve, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. And you've been listening to the Subiquitous podcast, often imitated, never equaled, or whatever that is. And by far, you can also get on SueDuffield.com. And we thank you so much for your gifts and keeping us alive and kicking after 2 years, over 14,000 subscribers. We can't believe it, but we're thanking God every single day that we just want to keep it going. And you're the best. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.